You really don't know until you get customers to give you a credit card and check out what they're going to want and who they're going to be. And so as we started to get to know our end customer more and more, we pivoted our selection, our curation, our size range to fit that need.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Nicole Krantz Bernstein, the founder and CEO over at Meems. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Pat.
Yeah, we're psyched to have you on today. Can you start out by giving us an overview of what Meems is?
Sure. So Meems is a multi-brand online e-commerce site for kids. Basically, the idea behind it was bringing sites like Net-a-Porter, Shopbop, Revolve, Smallable into the kids space and into the US and attracting those millennial parents that are looking for an easier way to shop online for their kids.
As we were chatting before the show, there were a lot of things that really stuck out to me that I want to get into today. I'm really excited for this. I think one of the coolest things, though, was how you really got to the business to where it is today, really how you generated the first, call it, year and a half of sales for the business. So I'd love to start out there. Business launches November 2022. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what do the next 2.5 years look like until we get to today? And what contributed so much to the business's growth?
Yeah. So, I think with any founder you ask that question to, the first 2 years or so, and even still now, can be summarized as trial and error. And, we've done a lot of different things to really figure out. And of course, there was a lot of research done before we actually launched, but you really don't know until you get customers to give you a credit card and check out what they're going to want and who they're going to be. And so as we started to get to know our end customer more and more, we pivoted our selection, our curation, our size range to fit that need. And so we started the business with just sizes 2 to 6, which corresponds most closely to that is the age of the kid. But we realized that we were missing out on a lot of the new moms that were looking for a way to shop. And by the time their kid reached age 2, they kind of had already figured it out. So we immediately pivoted in February or March, a few months after we launched, to include baby. So that was one example. And then I think what you're referring to most specifically was we started doing in-person events at the local community level because in retail, your best knowledge that you can get is observing the way your customers shop, which is obviously very hard to do online. And so we felt that just getting in front of the customer, explaining what we were doing, and then letting them see the clothes, we could, at a very grassroots level, learn even more about what they were looking for.
And first of all, I'll definitely agree. So I have a 7-month-old son. And in terms of shopping, I would say probably the first 4 months of his life, my wife and I had no idea what we were doing shopping. And now I feel like we're starting to get our process down. We're a little bit more lax about he's running low on pajamas that fit him. And we're like, oh, we know exactly where we're gonna order that from. We'll get that sorted out. We'll go to this one place and then we'll go to this place for this other thing. So I love the idea to start out trying to really build a relationship with moms even earlier in the journey. To your point about in-person sales though, that it's such an interesting trend that I would say it's in the past couple of months as I've been talking to more and more founders that I've started to hear that emerge. So I'd love to dive into the in-person events. Let's start out with how you actually find good events to go to. Are there, whether it's certain websites that you find are really effective in sourcing those types of events, whether it's certain Google searches? Yeah, let's say that I'm launching, I love the example of razor blade brands. I feel like listeners will know that's the example I always go with, but I'm launching a razor blade brand company and I'm trying to figure out in-person events to go to. What's your recommendation? How can I find a couple good spots to start?
It's a great question. Honestly, I wish there was a better resource. I think for a while it was really just grit. And at first it started from my own personal network of figuring out different schools and community centers and religious institutions that often host these events. A lot of them started with a percentage of sales going back to that organization. So it was more of like a charity thing, which for us was a win-win because we got the in-person experience. We didn't have to worry about getting people to come. That was already built in. And we were supporting their local community in some way, which made it an even friendlier relationship. I will say it was difficult in the beginning of creating and finding that network. But as with anything, once you kind of get that first bite at the apple, it becomes that much easier. And now we're fully getting inbounds. That's the way we fully source this, is by inbounds at this point. So it took a little time, but that was kind of the route we went. And yes, because we're in the kids space, really starting with my nieces and nephews' schools and things like that was how we found our target. And then it just kicked off from there.
And to your point, I can imagine maybe it was the first 5 events, 10 events. It was all about, let's just get in front of as many people as possible. Let's go to as many of these events as we can. My assumption is as the business has grown, you've had to be a little bit more picky with which events you go to and which you say, hey, maybe that's not a right fit for us. Are there certain characteristics that you find that really help you to decide whether an in-person event is like a great fit, maybe just an okay fit, or really just not the right fit for your business at this stage?
It's a great question. The way I look at it is there's always good learning. So even if the sales don't come from that particular event, I try to always zoom out and write down what I learned about the customer, why it didn't work. Was it because of our price point or our selection, or is this our core customer, or were we just in a totally different market? I really try to use it as free customer research and helping us improve our curation as opposed to pure sales, because the reason we're doing this, of course, the sales are great, but the reason we're really doing this is because of that learning that we can't get online without the data at this stage of the company to support some of our assumptions.
And that's such a great way to look at it of, hey, let's really focus on collecting data. If we get sales, that's great. But biggest thing that we're getting out of this event is learning about how people are interacting with our products and ultimately starting to build that relationship with them. Let's talk about maybe the actual like setup for a physical event. First, are there certain, I'll use the term very broadly, are there certain banners, signage, you name it, that you have found are really effective for your business that, you'll always bring with you to these events and you'll set it up at every single event? Or do you think it just doesn't really matter?
So we've done a lot to get better at this. And I think there's always a million things that I'm like, oh, I wish we had this, or I need to order that. I think what we've become most known for is I set up 2 giant rolling racks of clothes and I bring samples of a lot of our styles. I separated boy on one side, girl on the other. And I think over time, I've learned to not pack it too tightly with too many options. That often creates fatigue, but also wanting to give enough of a selection to show that you can find anything that you need on the site and to not limit ourselves. In terms of signage and whatnot, I honestly think just those racks of showing off the clothes themselves and the way we curate them has been amazing to draw people in. And then I follow up with postcards with a discount code and our name and our Instagram handle and all of that after the customers sort of pulled in and browsing the clothes.
Struggling to get new customers? We're here to help. Hey, this is Pat, the host of Customer Growth Sessions. Our agency, Intergrowth, has been helping e-commerce brands like Bella Bridesmaids, Brevity, and JS Dental to get more customers online since 2016. Interested in seeing how we'd help you? head over to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary consultation with me. That's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show.
I was going to say both Moo.com and Vistaprint are listening in. They were both hoping they'd get a shout out there, but I like that way better.
Both of those companies have been helpful. And also Ecoenclose is the company we use for a lot of our packaging and signage as well.
Oh, I love that. I was going to say I haven't heard of that one. So listeners, if you're curious, we'll add a link to the show notes as well so you can check them out. I know you mentioned really the biggest thing that you're hoping to get out of these events is getting to meet customers, getting to learn about how they interact with your products, really just getting a better sense of, hey, how do we make the business better for these individuals so that we can apply that to everyone? If there was a single sales metric, let's say that you're looking to get out of in-person events, in your experience, are you really looking, let's say, to get the in-person sale, get someone to pull out their credit card and process the transaction now? Are you looking for email subscribers? In your opinion, what's the most beneficial in the long term?
The long term, I think, is the key distinction here, because obviously in the short term, just getting a sale is why we're there. And we do the whole setup, which is pretty laborious a lot of times. However, I think that the real thing that I'm focused on is that email subscription, because no matter what they purchase today or in person and the size of the order or whatever it is, I feel that once we get them in our email, we're able to really speak to them, and we're getting better and better as time goes on, but really explaining what we're here to do. They've already met me or somebody on the team, so they know that we're trustworthy. And then we just keep reinforcing that trust over time and giving them more and more reasons to come back.
Now, in terms of in-person events, largely because the setup that you've described, I envision it's pretty time intensive to put that together. So let's say there's an event that's starting, let's go with 10 a.m. Do you find that you're showing up there at 9 a.m. to get ready for the event? Are you showing up at 6 a.m. and, the second the door is open, you're taking the next 4 hours, let's say, to get everything put together?
Yes, I like to get there just so that I'm not rushing and feeling stressed. I like to get there 2 hours in advance is like great. So if it's a 10 a.m. start, I'm going to try to get there by 7:45. Then I can have a coffee, set things up, and then also think about who I think the clientele is that's coming. So, for example, if it's an event where actual kids are coming, I'm putting all the sparkly things, all of the headbands and hats and things that they get really excited about at the front to draw them in. If it's more of the mom or the grandma, I might change how I do the setup. So it allows me to kind of get in, understand who is coming better, and then tweak the setup a little bit so that I can attract the most people to come over.
So Nicole, when you and I were first talking, one of the things that really stood out to me is the overarching theme that I would describe as doing the unsexy things. You talk about going to all these in-person events, taking 2 hours to put together everything for the events, really so you can learn about customers. And in my opinion, based on what you've shared, it sounds like that's been a huge driver of success for the business. So can we talk a little more about that? What are your views on doing the unsexy things? Would you say that does describe you? And what do you think other founders can learn from you in that sense?
Yeah. And I should also mention that there's also the hour or 2 or 3 the night before the event of packing everything up, packing the car. It's definitely a lot of time. But I think it's really important. We talked about this, doing things that don't scale in the beginning, and also being in the retail world. Everybody will tell you that in person is the way to go to get those customer insights. And I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods for a brief period of time, and that's really how the founders there grew their whole business by designating time every week or month to make sure they were in stores. And so when I was starting a purely online e-commerce business, I had to figure out, how am I going to do that where I can still get those learnings, but remain true to the core premise of the business, which is really online. So I think in these early days, and I think even as we grow and scale, having some form of in-person interaction is really, really important. And also, if I had $1 for every time somebody said to me at an event, oh, this is Meems, like we got targeted from you online, but I didn't know what it was and I wasn't sure. But now I'm so glad that I met you because now I'm going to become an online shopper. I think that's just a good way early on when you can't invest in brand marketing and you don't have that awareness to build that trust and relationship with the customer.
Along those lines, with just that willingness to sit down and, as you said, take an hour or a couple of hours the night before, 2 hours before the event starts, and then spend the entire day at an event. Those are, in my experience, and I see it oftentimes when I'll talk to like e-com founders that come from a strong corporate background, that it can be really tough to go back into that mindset that maybe if you're talking to a founder who's 18, 20 years old, they're way more comfortable doing a lot of those things.
So I think that when you're starting a company, and for me, I launched this out of business school, there's a lot of focus a lot of time on the planning and building a pretty deck and having a good model that can project things out. But I think what I learned when I turned the on button on to our Shopify website, of course, we had an influx of orders that first few days because we tried to create some buzz around the launch. But after that, you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, now what do I do? I've been focusing all of my time and effort on this launch. How do I keep it going? And of course, there's endless things you can do behind your computer, but I am not a patient person and I have a bias toward action. And so I just decided that I needed to feel like I was physically doing something more. And so that's when I thought back to all of the things I had learned in my previous experience of getting in front of the customer and how do I connect with them. And so in-person events and customer service actually were my two biggest ways of doing that. And I myself did all of the customer service until very recently.
People ask me all the time, should I be using ChatGPT to create content for my site? So here's the thing. AI is great at quickly spitting out blog content. It's also great at pissing off your following. If you've spent years building your brand and follower base, why would you risk that all with AI-generated content? At Intergrowth, we work with companies that see their brand as an asset to get more customers through human-crafted articles that your customers look for online. We master your brand voice and work with your team to write the best articles on the internet that bring you customers on autopilot from search engines like Google. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team.
And I love when I hear founders that take on the customer service emails. In my experience, like it's the type of thing, the first job that I had, first desk job that I had while I was in school, I was in charge of the customer service emails. And it's not always the most glamorous job. It's a really tough job. But yeah, I mean, as a founder, being able to sit down and be the one to answer those emails, there's going to be a lot of repetition in there. There's going to be certainly some angry customers that just don't understand how your product works or have this or this concern. There's going to be some emails that make no sense at all. And you're like, I think you have a different business than the one you're reaching out to. Like, we don't sell this type of product. But being able to sit down and hear, like, what do people actually think? What do they really like? What's frustrating them right now? It's so valuable in building a better product down the road.
Totally. And what is that confusion? Because we've definitely had some of those emails of people, in my view, not getting it. But then instead of just saying like, they don't get what we're doing, I'm like, well, why are we attracting them in the first place? What about our messaging is not resonating or giving them the proper idea of what we are so that they can either leave or continue on their journey? So I think just always taking a step back and trying to remove the pit that you might have in your stomach or the frustration and just really looking for those nuggets of learning, because especially in the early days, that can really make or break your business.
And one of the other points that I'm hearing from what you shared is, I think, one of the really tough parts about starting an e-com business, especially for people that are coming, I would say, from like a really strong corporate background. I'm thinking people that have, long corporate careers where they're used to managing really big projects, larger budgets. Oftentimes, in my experience, it can be really hard for those individuals to shift to the mentality of, hey, I need to be the one to answer these customer service emails. I need to be the one to go to these in-person events. Because maybe you're just accustomed to having someone else do that. You're accustomed to having larger budgets to work with. But, especially first couple of years of starting a new business, unless you have huge VC funding or, unless your sales are monumental in the first couple of years, like you're probably better off taking that limited budget and doing a lot of those things yourself, getting more comfortable with those things. And exactly as you've done, using it as an opportunity to learn a ton about your customers. And in my opinion, that's one of the huge reasons that you've been able to grow the brand so effectively, so quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely a mind shift change. And my journey with funding, I've changed my mind a lot of times and my opinion on it. I think for me, we've been bootstrapping since we launched. And I think for me, that was really important because it gave me a finite amount of resources that I had to work with to make this happen. And there was nothing else in a different account or a savings fund to get us out of whatever situation we were in. And I had to figure out how to make it work with what I had. And I think that gives you the mentality that you really need to just get it done and figure it out. And those are really the two biggest qualities that you need when you're working in a small business. That being said, we are in our first fundraise right now. We're in an angel round because I felt that we've built enough of a proof of concept and have a lot of green shoots that having a little bit more to work with, we could start to scale a little bit faster. So I think there's that constant tug and figuring out, how do I do this in a more scrappy way versus when do I bring on some additional funding so that we can really prove out that this is working. And I think we spoke about this before. The question early on is really, should this business exist? And so that was my guiding North Star question of, do people want this? And until that close to a yes, or pretty clearly a yes, there's not much else to do until you figure that out. Because if the business doesn't need to exist, there's no use in raising funds and spending a lot of money on it. So that's how I thought about it in the beginning.
And along those lines, I'd love to get your opinion on this. Maybe signs or what questions should founders, in your opinion, be asking themselves before they really decide that they want to go fully bootstrapped or they want to take on a funding round? Obviously, the answer can change over time, but maybe are there one or two questions or one or two concepts that really came to mind to you that helped you decide that we're going to go for this angel round?
Yeah. To start, let me just back up and say some businesses have to raise right away because they're not able to generate revenue without building out their product, specifically in tech. That's what I think of is you kind of need to pay for that team of engineers to build your product. For me, I was able to create an MVP or minimum viable products with very little funds. I was able to just set up a Shopify store and get going and hit the ground running. And from there, we were able to generate revenue right away and start funding some of the business just through bootstrapping, as I mentioned. So I think to take a step back, obviously you need to know what kind of business you're in and what's required to just get something going. From there, I think I waited this long because I was looking at a few things. The first was obviously sales. So we were growing every single month despite seasonality trends. Obviously, there were a few months here and there when numbers dip because you're coming right off the holiday season, or it's just, but for us, July, right before back to school, when you're kind of done with summer shopping and waiting on back to school, that's another dip. But for the most part, we were really not experiencing that seasonality too much because we were in such a growth mode. So that was number one. Number two was repeat customer rate. That was a big one for us. And people not only were willing to give us their credit card and check out, but then they were coming back again. So that was another positive indicator that we should keep going. And the third was gifting. We were seeing a lot of people using the site for gifting, which was a core reason why I built it. But specifically, what I mean by that and why I think that was so special was because that's a form of a referral. And so you were getting 2 customers for the price of 1. Somebody was willing to send a gift from my site, which meant they loved it enough to share it with somebody. And then many times from there, the giftee would come back and shop themselves, or they would want to exchange it or need something. And we obviously followed up with what I hope is always amazing customer service, and that brought them in as well. So those were 3 things that really stood out to me as to why we should continue and why I wanted to bring on a little bit of funding for the first time now.
Maybe last thing that we'll dive into before we wrap up is the concept of gifting. You're in the baby clothes and gift space. I'd imagine gifting is maybe a little bit more central to a business like yours than some other listeners' businesses. But gifting is a huge angle that I don't hear a lot of e-com founders talking about. You mentioned setting up the sites. You were ready to take on gifting. What are some of the updates that you made really to create that seamless gifting experience that maybe other listeners should think about doing for their business?
Yes. So for me, I am an aunt. So I started this business as a gifter. I was looking for memes when my nieces and nephew were born, and I couldn't find it. And I think that was a big thing I had in mind going into building this site was, how do I make this easy and straightforward for not just a mom or a grandma who kind of knows what they're doing, but also the aunt, uncle, friend, or other person in that kid's life that wants to spoil them. And with kids, it's such a highly predictable life cycle with so many milestones that people want to give a little gift for. And outside of just the classic like birthday and holiday time, that making that easy to do was a core initiative. And so how we did that was, well, previously online, I could never find a place where I could curate things from a few different brands or build a full outfit or get an outfit with a little toy, because the outfit is for the mom and the toy is for the kid. So I could never find a place where I could put multiple things in one box that would come together and then obviously gift wrapped really nicely with a note. And so that really didn't exist, that ability. On Amazon, you can't do that. And some of the other sites out there, you weren't able to do that. And so from the start, we allowed, you can pay $5 for gift wrap. And that includes also a handwritten note, because since it's for the kid, you often want them to feel like it's more personal. And so that was a core feature of ours. And again, it was, what is the problem? That was a huge problem. And it's something that made us very different. And I think you always need to focus on what can differentiate you. And that was a key thing early on and still to this day.
To your point, because for me, like, I love buying gifts for people online. And there are so many scenarios that I'll end up buying a gift online. I'll get it delivered to my home, unpackage it, repackage it up in different wrapping paper, which, as my wife will always love to say, I'm terrible at wrapping things. So
Right.
It's a huge net negative if I'm the one wrapping something.
Exactly.
Write a custom little note. And then like that, you've wasted all this paper, you've wasted all this tape. You get a bad wrapping job from me now. Like, nobody wins in that scenario.
Right. And then a lot of times, if you don't live in the same place as your family, or you're sending to a friend or whatever it may be, then you have to ship it back out. So we wanted to make it that much easier and more seamless, where it's just a one-stop shop. You go on, you pick out what you want, and we'll really take care of the rest and put that TLC, that love and care, into wrapping that and with the handwritten notes, so that, once you check out, you don't have to worry.
Well, Nicole, this has been so fun. For listeners that want to shop on Meems and maybe just want to follow you to learn more, first tell us, where can they buy Meems online?
Yes. So the website is shopmeems.com, shopmeems.com. And our Instagram is the same at shopmeems.
I love it. I love it. Once again, listeners, this is Nicole Krantz Bernstein, the founder and CEO over at Meems. Nicole, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Pat. This was so much fun, and I'm really glad we got to do this.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.